Your jaw isn't tight because you have TMJ, it's tight because of your beliefs. Buckle up because I'm about to blow your mind and explain how that is related to your money stories and bank account. Welcome to video 3 of the Wealth Detective series. I'm Angie, the Inner Glow Coach, and stay until the end because, like all of my videos, I have an action step that you can start implementing immediately in your day-to-day life. Because this isn't about information. Information is everywhere. This is about embodying who we really are instead of living by inherited money stories. And if you didn't watch video 2, the link is in the description. I highly recommend watching that first because we talked about the 3 archetypes behind the core belief of worthiness and what prevents you from receiving money. And today we're going to talk about the 3 archetypes that prevent you from keeping and holding money. So this is important because receiving money is only half of the equation. Keeping it is the other half. And just to be clear, when I say keeping, I'm not talking about hoarding because that comes from a scarcity mindset. I'm talking about not letting it fall through your fingers or impulse shopping it away because it doesn't feel safe to keep. So I'm just going to get right into the case files. Like I said in the last video, the purpose of segmenting them into identities is for awareness purposes only. I simply want you to be aware of the behaviors and become a detective and see your behaviors as clues because all your behaviors are clues and they point back to a money story. So this is simply for awareness. You may relate to none of them. You may relate to all of them. You may relate to some of them, and all of that is okay. The entire point is awareness. And if you do strongly identify with any of these, no shame, simply put on your, is it called a deer stalker, the Sherlock Holmes cap? Put on your detective cap and let's get into the case files. So if you remember from video 2, the core wound behind those archetypes was worthiness. So the core wound behind the archetypes that prevent you from keeping and holding money is safety. And we'll get to more of that in a minute, but I also want to point out technically these archetypes could also prevent you from receiving money, but from what I have found in my experience with myself and clients is that mostly the ones we talked about in video 2 prevent you from receiving money, and the archetypes that we're going to talk about today prevent you from keeping and holding money. So we have 3 main suspects, and we're just going to get right into it. The first one is brace for impact. So the core belief is if something good happens, that means something bad is going to happen to take away from the good thing. So the identity is that she believes that success is temporary and safety always comes from preparing for disaster. And again, if you didn't watch video 2, what I mean by identity is who you believe you are and what you believe is available to you, which is directly related to this core belief. And the worst part about this identity, and I know this from my own personal experience and the clients that I've worked with, is you can't even enjoy the good things that happen to you because you're always waiting for the next bad thing. Or if something good happens, you can't even bask in those good feelings because your mind starts jumping to what can go wrong. And what I used to do was always think about, well, I feel good, so that means something bad is now going to happen to take this feeling away from me. And this is coming from letting external things dictate your circumstances because trust me, and I'm not saying life is always perfect, but it is possible to feel good no matter what. And I'm not saying you don't dip into your feelings because we are human beings. It's okay to feel your feelings. So I'm not saying I never feel anxiety. I never feel fear. I never feel sad. I just don't stay there because as a functional adult, we have way more agency about how we feel than we think. And another good, this is kind of a side tangent, which we'll get into brace for impact in a minute. But I used to have this mindset of like, if I felt good, I couldn't even enjoy it because I was always thinking of like, now something is going to go wrong to take this feeling away from me. But I would never, if I felt bad, I would never be like, oh, well, the good news is now something good can happen to make me feel better. So there's always a flip side, and that's a good way to reframe this. Like, yes, maybe something, because life isn't perfect. Yes, maybe something will happen to take me out of this moment, but that feeling of goodness and feeling happy is always available to me because I have agency over my own emotions. So that was just a little side rant. The money story behind the brace for impact is I can't trust money to stay. So this is maybe you receive a bonus from work or some kind of windfall of money, but then you're like, well, now my refrigerator is going to break, or now XYZ is going to happen, because you don't trust that you can keep it and hold it. And again, I think the worst part of this is just not even being able to enjoy that moment, because if you do receive a windfall of money, that should feel good, but you don't let yourself enjoy that. And again, like, this probably comes from your childhood, that you were always bracing for the next thing. And I'll just leave it at that, because I think this is definitely impactful, but I think the next group, because again, if you haven't watched video 2, I picked out, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So these stories and identities, they don't just affect your money, they affect all areas of your life. So I picked 3 main areas where I feel like they impact your life the most. And the point of this is not to necessarily identify with the story, because there can be a gazillion different specific stories based on your circumstances. The point of this is to look at your behaviors as clues. So if these behaviors resonate with you, then you may have a brace for impact story. And the good news is you can always rewrite your stories and beliefs. So the next grouping is also extremely important for the brace for impact identity, and that is the voice story. So this is someone who is afraid to say how they feel because they're immediately expecting criticism in return. So they may overthink it, they may not even speak up at all, to be honest. And this is where the tight jaw and maybe even tight throat come in, because it's like you want to speak up, but you're clinched because you don't feel emotionally safe to express yourself. So if you have a tight jaw or grind your teeth, that can absolutely come from this bracing for impact. It can also just be a physical reaction to even the money story, because when something quote unquote bad happens, because again, I know this sounds cliche, but I do think everything happens for a reason. But in that moment, your body feels stressed. So maybe even your shoulders tighten up. It took me years to get out of the habit of not clenching my jaw and not having my shoulders up by my ears and actually relaxing them where they should be. And another thing about the tight jaw, relaxing my jaw fed into my emotional state, just like having a tight jaw fed into my emotional state. Because when your shoulders are up and your jaw is tight and you're all tense, that feeds into the anxiety and the overthinking. But when your body is relaxed, then that feeds into a different belief and identity. And also on the tight jaw, if this is you, for me, my jaw was so chronically tight that I actually had to start getting Botox in my jaw, because even when I physically and consciously wanted to relax my jaw, I physically and consciously literally could not loosen my jaw because the muscles were just so tight. So if you struggle with this, there are jaw massagers and other good things, but Botox, it's kind of expensive because you need a lot, but it was so worth it for me because it got me out of that cycle and I was able to consciously relax my jaw. So a tight jaw is a huge behavioral sign, or clenching your jaw or grinding your teeth is a huge behavioral clue behind bracing for impact. And the relationship story is, if I let my guard down, I'll get hurt. So you're constantly hypervigilant, waiting for the other shoe to drop and struggling to relax. This was totally me, because in my family of origin, my mom was always very angry and had a very explosive nature. So I always had to be hyper vigilant. Even if things were going well, I couldn't even enjoy it, which explains all of the other things because, again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I developed this habit. Even if things are going well, I need to be hyper vigilant and wait for the other shoe to drop. And this is a perfect example of how your beliefs affect what you attract. Because for a long time, I would attract romantic partners, even some platonic friendships, but 100 up until a certain point in my life, 100% of the romantic partners that I attracted into my life would always have I it happened so often that I came up with a term for it, and I would call it the light switch moment, meaning everything would be going fine for like 3 or 4 months, and they would flip this switch and become a completely different person. And I am not talking about the honeymoon period wearing off, although I do think that was part of it, but it was like they were just being a totally different person to win my approval. And then they would relax into this totally different personality, which was not ideal and not who I wanted to be with. And then the people pleasing and everything else that came along with it would cause me not to leave right away. So then I would develop this hypervigilancy because it's like, oh my God, are they going to switch again? And even at the beginning of the relationship, I would just come to expect this light switch moment. So I was attracting people who allowed me to behave in this way. So this is another reason why it is so important to rewrite these beliefs, because then you just start attracting totally different things into your life. So that is the brace for impact archetype. The next one is the self-protector. So we've all heard of the fear of failure, which I think is very common, but something that's also very common that isn't talked about enough, in my opinion, is the self-protector. And I'm going to pause because there's a siren. So the self protector has a fear of success. So the core belief is if I become too big, I'll lose people. So her identity is wrapped around playing small so that she can stay connected to the people that she loves. So, how this shows up in money is if I make more money, people will judge or reject me. So, this shows up a lot with families who grew up where the parents were always like, rich people are greedy, rich people are selfish, whatever. Because then, if you become that rich person, then you'll be the person that your parents didn't like. And subconsciously, and in your body and your nervous system, you don't want to be a person that your parents don't like. So subconsciously, you don't want to make more money. So again, this could prevent you from receiving money, but usually this doesn't hit because consciously you want money and then you get it. And then all of a sudden your subconscious and nervous system freaks out because it's like, oh my God, now people are going to judge me. And then if people judge me, then I'll be rejected. Or even worse, a lot of people have an abandonment wound. So fear of judgment can also be stemmed in abandonment, which, I mean, every human being has a desire of belonging. So rejection absolutely hurts, but abandonment is a horrible feeling. So if you have this money story, even though you consciously want money, you may not raise your prices, you may turn down opportunities. This is very deeply rooted in a fear of visibility, because when you are visible, you will attract business and people who like you. You also attract the haters, but visibility puts you in a position for success. But if success causes you to be the person that your parents or family or whoever didn't like, subconsciously you don't want to become that person. So you will find self-sabotaging ways to somehow blow all your money so that you don't have money, and therefore you can stay in this place where it's safe. So how this shows up in your voice: if you don't feel safe expressing yourself and you don't want to be the person who's judged or rejected or abandoned, then you'll keep your opinions to yourself. So you don't share ideas. You don't want to bother anyone. You don't want to be quote unquote too much. And I'm going to go off on another side rant, and maybe not because it is related, because I hear this a lot from women who come to me. They don't want to be too much. What does too much even mean? Because for me, my parents thought I was too much, but that their definition was just someone they couldn't handle, because my parents were the kind of people, they never got out of their comfort zone. They never did anything or experienced anything. So me being this fully expressed person was quote unquote too much for them. But in my world, because again, we create our own rules for life, and I have a whole separate playlist on that, and that's a whole thing in my coaching philosophy that I work with women on. But when you make your own rules for life, you get to define what's too much or not enough. And in my world, there is no such thing as too much. Like, if you are extra, go all out, because I don't think there are enough people in this world being fully expressed, because a lot of people have this self-protector shield. So if you think you are too much, there's no such thing. So go be yourself. But anyway, I think a lot of people can relate to these behavioral clues, because even in school, if you speak up with the wrong answer or say the wrong thing, you risked being made fun of, being judged, being rejected, possibly even abandoned. So this is another one that is super common and shows up a lot. The relationship story: if I outgrow people, I'll end up alone. So I will say the unfortunate side of success is that you do lose people. I am not going to sugarcoat that. And if you listen to any famous person, they have lost people on their journey. I remember Snoop Dogg has talked about this a lot. I like to listen to interviews with people who have achieved success to hear about their mindset and other things. And unfortunately, this is a very common theme. But I will say from my own experience, for any person I have ever lost, someone, I hate this word and I'll explain why I use it in a minute, someone better has taken their place. And by better, I mean a better fit for me, because I don't think anyone is inherently better or worse than someone else. You just have people who are a better fit for you and where you're at on your journey. And because we're constantly evolving human beings, I actually think it's a good thing to have continuously, expanding and shrinking circles around you. Because one thing I know for sure is never underestimate the value of surrounding yourself with loving and supportive people, because I used to surround myself with unloving and unsupportive people, and I was constantly anxious and depressed because they were always just projecting all of their things on me, and it's not a good place to be. So as long as you're surrounded with loving and supportive people, you are winning in life, even if that means eventually you have to outgrow them. Because, and I know this sounds cliche, but everything always works out in the end. And that doesn't mean you have to necessarily cut people off, but you do have to evaluate how much you want to engage with them, because your energy is so valuable and you need to protect it with your life. But this is a valid fear, but again, it's always It's always possible to rewrite your story and rewrite your beliefs, which is why I'm so passionate about this. Because if these are your behaviors or your stories, this is why I don't want you to get too attached to the identity, because there's always an aspirational identity that you can achieve on the other side. So the last one is the leaky bucket. And the core belief is that I'm just not meant to hold abundance. Or another way to say this is like, it's just not available to me. So even if it comes, it also goes. So the identity is believing that money, time, love, and opportunities are meant to flow through her, not stay with her. So this also, well, I'll get to it in a second. This definitely shows up in many areas of life. So with money, a story is money always slips through my fingers. And I actually had one of my clients come to me, and her mom, and this is why I use this as a story, her mom specifically said these words out loud to her. So this became one of her beliefs. So way this can show up in behaviors is impulse spending, can't save consistently, gives too much away. And I can't remember, I think there was an identity in the last video, but sometimes giving money away, it's justified as being altruistic or whatever, and it can be. That doesn't mean you're not a generous or altruistic person, but it could be hiding behind this story. So it's okay to be altruistic, but it's not okay to have a belief that's not even true, because ultimately we are all meant to hold abundance and circulate money. So if this is your belief that you're not meant to hold abundance, 99.99999% of the time, it is not a true belief. So if you're going to live from a belief, it might as well be a true one. And money always slipping through my fingers is not the truth. So if that's your story, let's rewrite it. And then for the voice story is, this is harder for the voice story. So this is the best one, I think. If I say no, people won't like me. So because you believe things come and go and things aren't going to stay, yeah, maybe that's not the best voice story, but these are behavioral clues for a leaky bucket voice. And that's just like defeated. What's the point? So I hear this sometimes on Instagram because there's a lot of salesy people on Instagram, and a lot of them, and I talked about this in the last video, they're like in your face, trying to prove, trying to convince. But every once in a while, I'll come across one where it's kind of like, what's the point? It's like the algorithm is confusing, the market saturated. So they're just kind of like, what's the point? So that can definitely come across in your voice. And think about it. When you hear this, you're probably thinking, well, what's the point? Why would I buy from you? Because you sound so defeated and unsure of yourself. So this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you're just like, what's the point? Well, then that's what you attract into your world. People who are like, what's the point of buying from you? So, and this is why your actual physical voice is so huge, because even if people, like I've learned, because I'm getting certified in psychology of the voice, I'm learning how to actually listen to these sounds and identify them. But most people, they're only processing them on a subconscious level. So even if they can't identify the specific sound of what's the point, they can hear it, and that definitely influences them. It's kind of like energy is real. People can, whether someone is woo-woo or science or whatever, or believes in anything, people can feel your energy. So the same thing applies to your voice. People can hear the sounds in your voice, even though they may not be able to pinpoint the specific behavioral clues behind it, or the stories behind it. So how this shows up in relationships is I have to keep giving to keep people, because you're always afraid that you're going to be abandoned. So you overfunction or rescue, or you feel responsible for everyone else's happiness, because it's like, if I don't do more or whatever, then they'll leave. So this is heavy from a fear and abandonment. And again, I keep forgetting to refer back to the core wound of safetyness, but all of these are about safety, because if I'm judged, if I'm rejected, or if I'm abandoned, it doesn't feel safe in your body, especially from an evolutionary standpoint. If you were rejected or abandoned from your tribe, that was almost always a certain death. So no one wants to be in that position. So I think we still have that caveman survival instinct of like wanting to belong and not be abandoned. Also, just from modern society, it's like it feels good to be loved and accepted. So, but you should never abandon yourself to not be abandoned by other people. So that's where some of these become dysfunctional. But again, if this is you, because trust me, and I think I mentioned this in the last video, anything I ever talk about, it's because I experienced myself. That's how I know it so well. And that's how I'm able to work with other women on this, because I have, first of all, I have experience, but I also have so much empathy. So again, if any of these are you, no shame. This is all about awareness, because you can rewrite any of these stories at any time. And if you resonate with any of those archetypes, I just want to be clear that absolutely nothing is wrong with you. It actually means that your subconscious and nervous system are doing their jobs, because your subconscious and nervous system want to keep you safe, because safe is familiar. If you've ever been in a toxic relationship and you've consciously thought, why am I doing this? Because it feels like shit. You hate it. You know you shouldn't be doing it, but you keep doing it. It's because your subconscious and nervous system are like, well, it's familiar because it probably reminds you of your family dynamics. So there's nothing wrong with you. And any behavior or whatever that doesn't feel good, it's probably not rooted in your truth. So again, this is why it's so important to rewrite these stories that are based in the truth instead of some inherited belief. And also, and I think I went on this rant in the last video, but anything I repeat, it's because it's important. If you do strongly identify with any of those archetypes, I just want to be clear that stories can be rewritten because I feel like, especially with astrology and human design, people fall into, well, this is just the way I am because I'm an Aries. Or I remember I met a girl once, she was actually a human design practitioner. And there was something in her chart that she interpreted as that she wasn't supposed to write a book until she's 50 and she was only in her mid 40s, and so she was like, well, I have to wait to write a book. And I think any identity that can be interpreted as disempowering, it's not true to you. And I know that's a hot take because, and I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with astrology or human design, but if you attach to an identity that's disempowering, you're going against the grain of who you really are. And we're all about writing our own rules for society here. So that's actually the opposite of what we want to be doing. And I also want to tell you before we get into the action item about another client, because I told you the client who her mom was like, money just falls through my fingers. But the client that I talked about in the last video, she was the one. She originally came to me about abundance mindset because she definitely had blocks around receiving money. And within a month and a half of working together, she got a new role at her company that almost doubled her salary. But her story doesn't stop there because then she got her new paycheck, which was thousands of dollars more than what she was getting before, and she blew it all immediately. And when we dug into it, it was because her mom would always verbally say, I'm not responsible with money. And words are spells. So guess what? Her mom was not responsible with money. So my client inherited this story. And guess what? She wasn't responsible with that first paycheck, but it gave us this opportunity because she saw that behavior as a clue and she came to me about it. So we were able to also rewrite that story so that she was able to safely keep hold and circulate money. So I just wanted to give you another example of how you keep uncovering things because healing is not an endpoint, it's a journey. So you might keep uncovering new stories, and that's okay. You just rewrite them. And also, before we get into the action item, I want to talk about a bonus archetype that I don't have a slide for because it's slightly different. The other ones that we talked about were based in core wounds, either worthiness or safety. This one is based on a behavior, and this case file is the impulse shopper. And the impulse shopper's primary belief is that something outside of me will make me feel better. And I think I've talked about this on other videos, but there are socially unacceptable ways to numb your feelings, and there are socially acceptable ways to numb your feelings. So, socially unacceptable is like drugs, porn, sex, video games. And socially acceptable ways could be like over exercising, running marathons. And I can go on a whole tangent about that, so I won't. Overworking, even impulse shopping, because impulse shopping does fall on on the cusp, because if you're in debt and you're impulse shopping, I think it is socially unacceptable. But if you can afford it, it's not socially acceptable. I shouldn't say it's not socially unacceptable. So it may not be as obvious. So I bring this up because it can be very sneaky, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the identity of the impulse shopper is she believes that comfort, relief, confidence, whatever feelings she's looking for are things that she has to get outside of herself instead of create within herself. So when life feels overwhelming or lonely or anxious or stressful, she reaches for something outside of herself. And impulse shopping in today's society is so easy, which is another reason I think this is so important to call out on its own. So I think we all know what impulse shopping is, so I won't go into what it is. But there's several reasons why this can be sneaky. Number one, it can feel like self-care, especially if you're buying something like skincare products or workout stuff. But it's based in this dysfunctional behavior of reaching for that thing to make you feel better. Or another reason this can be sneaky is because if you have enough disposable income, you don't necessarily notice it. And again, it's socially acceptable. So everything's going along as fine, but you're just numbing your feelings. And my own personal story with this is I actually didn't start becoming an impulse shopper until COVID. I was just so stressed out and that's when I went through my emotional rock bottom, which is a totally separate story, so I won't get into that here. But then I continued with the habit mostly because I had enough. This is when I was working in corporate America. I had enough disposable income to cover it up. And it wasn't until I started my own business, because I quit corporate America cold turkey and lived off my savings and until I started making money in my business. So I went through my budget with a fine-tooth comb because because I was living off my savings, I was like, I have to cut out anything that's not necessary. And I shockingly discovered I was spending at least $500 a month, if not more, some months, on total bullshit. But I wasn't even aware of it because I had enough disposable income to cover it up. So I bring this up, number one, because it can be very sneaky. And also, I want to bring awareness to one of the very best things that I have learned as an adult is how to feel safe in my body while feeling my feelings. Because when you give your power away to things outside of yourself, it slowly erodes your self trust. And that's how I ended up with very low self trust at one point that I had to build back up. And all of my clients come to me with low self trust. And it's so easy in today's society. And I'm going to go off on another mini rant about woo woo. Anyone who knows me knows I love woo woo. So again, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it can very easily turn into spiritual bypassing. How do I know this? Because I've done it, my clients have done it, because you're reaching for the healer to take away your pain. You're reaching for the tarot reading to tell you what to do. You're reaching for the crystal to give you energy. You're reaching for the ceremony to take away your pain. And you have to do the inner work. And I feel like we know it's not easy and we want to reach for the thing that feels good. And it may feel good in the moment, but it's not actually healing you at the root, or it's not rewriting your money story at the root. So, this is why it's so important to trust yourself and trust that you can handle. And the inner work, it's not all doom and gloom. There are, like, because you start seeing progress, you get the confidence and motivation to keep going. So you have to trust yourself to stay with you during the times where it's not as, rainbows and unicorns as spiritual bypassing can be. So that's my mini rant on self trust and woo woo. Here's your action step, and it's about impulse shopping. The next time you catch yourself about to buy something to get a feeling or a dopamine hit, I just want you to stop yourself, even if it's just for 10 seconds. What am I feeling right now? And what do I actually need? And that is it. You can actually still buy the thing. The whole point is to get you in the practice of awareness, because I'm not going to lie, sometimes I still buy the thing for the dopamine hit. And that's okay. Number one, because I don't do it that often. And number two, I'm fully aware that I'm doing it. So as long as you're acting with self awareness, that's all that matters for now, because self awareness is the first step to actually making changes in your life. So right now, all I'm asking is for a practice of self-awareness. And again, you're not collecting evidence that you're bad with money. You're collecting evidence that your nervous system and subconscious are working, and you just want to rewrite any story that is not the truth. Because every behavior leaves clues, every clue points to story, and every story can be rewritten. And if anything in today's video or video 2 made you think, holy F, I do that, then I want to invite you to something I am so excited about. It is called the Overflow Society. And this is a small group of women where we rewrite our money stories together. So each week we take one of these moments where you catch yourself thinking, why the hell did I just do that? And we investigate it together. So not only are you rewriting your own money stories, you're learning from other women as they are rewriting theirs. Because I do think community and support are an important part of this process. And once you know what story that your behaviors are pointing to, everything starts making sense because again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So we can also work on the stories behind voice, relationships, and other places that these are showing up in our lives. And because I want this to feel like we're sitting on the couch drinking coffee with friends, not like a Facebook group with like people you don't even know. So for that reason, I'm only opening 5 founding member spots. I do think eventually this is going to grow into something greater, but this is my test group. So, and I want to know every woman who's in the group so that and I want everyone to know each other. So I want to truly build something intentional for the test group so that we can see where this goes. So if you are ready to stop asking, what the hell is wrong with me? And start asking, what is this behavior trying to tell me? And I want someone who's a total hell yes. And if this is you, I will put the link in the description. This hasn't been released yet. But if you sign up for my email list, I will let you know. You will be the first to know when it's released. So you will have the first opportunity to sign up. So I would be super happy to have anyone on my YouTube community here. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, like I get my story now. I know my behaviors. Now what? That's what we're talking about in video 4 because I am going to show you how to actually start rewriting your money stories. So I will see you in video 4.